Last Monday when I heard my alarm go off, I rolled over and I fumbled for my glasses. I wanted to see what time it was for one thing, but also when I looked at my screen of my phone, I saw that there was a urgent news flash. So I fumbled for my glasses because I couldn't read it, and as I read it, I took the phone, I turned it over, and I put my head in a pillow and went back to sleep. When I woke up, it was still there, of course, and I read it. But then when I came to work, I didn't say anything about it. And Colette didn't say anything about it either for a long time, for several hours. I remembered that when events like this have happened in the past, then as soon as you see someone else, you're talking about it so quickly, but not this time. This time, we were silent. I even called the chairperson of the Council of Elgin Religious Leaders, Denise Tracy, and I asked her, are we having a vigil or some kind of recognition of what happened? And she said, no. I was surprised at that, too. So later on in that day, on Monday, I organized a vigil in front of a downtown church on a sidewalk, a vigil of 15 minutes of silence by candlelight. We all stood together quietly, and then we left, and then we went home. Many of you have asked for me to talk about this incident today, and I will do my very best to do so, although I confess it is difficult. Before I speak, I will read you the words of Jesus in Matthew 6, and then we will observe a time of silence. And then after the sermon, we will observe another time of silence before I sit down. Our reading for today is in Matthew chapter 6, starting with verse 9. Pray then in this way: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. The thing that appeared on my screen has been called a massacre. A massacre is an immoral act of wholesale slaughter. This incident transcends the other incidents that we have experienced in the past dozen or so years. Our president, President Trump, called it an act of pure evil. When he called it that, an act of pure evil, he was describing something that transcends shootings or terrorist acts. He has moved us into theological ground. Evil is something that we find plenty of in Scripture, but we don't talk about it often in our churches. We also find plenty of evil in our world, but we try not to talk about that either. So what does Scripture teach us about evil? In Psalm 34, which is the psalm that you heard this morning, we are told to depart from evil and to do good, to seek peace and to pursue it. In the prayer that Jesus taught us, we are asked to entreat God to deliver us from the evil one. In Psalm 23, we are told that because the Lord is our shepherd, we can fear no evil. Notice that evil is not something that we are told to do battle with. We are to depart from it. We are to resist it. We are to turn away from it. We are not asked to battle with it, probably for good reason. In our scriptures, we would get the idea that we should treat evil the way we would treat a deadly poison, to stay away from it and protect ourselves from it. And that is what most of us try to do. But when something like the massacre on Monday happens, it becomes a little more difficult, because I'm sure you noticed that this wasn't exactly like the other things that have happened in recent history. This particular incident happened at the hands of a person who looked like he had led a normal life. There is nothing in his past that would seem to indicate that he would ever even think of doing such a thing. And it surprises us also because he was not one of the usual people that we see in our world, that we often blame in our world, that do these sorts of things, like blacks or immigrants or terrorists. He was not like that at all either. In fact, he was a little bit like all of us, a relatively successful man in our world. You know, when we come in contact with evil, the very first thing we try to do is to separate ourselves from it. We want to keep ourselves safe from it. We want to protect ourselves from it. So to do that, we look at the person who committed the evil act and we say, oh, that person isn't like us. They are whatever, something else, something that we are not. But in this particular instance, we notice that we can't do that so easily. This person was actually a lot like all of us, so it makes it very difficult for us to put the evil outside of us, to get it out of our purview and somewhere else where we can place it so we don't have to think about it or look at it. That is the general thing that we do in situations like that, like have happened today, but not in this case. Is it possible that all of us are capable of doing what that man did on Monday? Is it possible that a person with a life that looks like a normal life could do something like that? Scripture teaches us that the answer to both of those questions are yes. Years ago, for 20 years actually, I was the administrator of 2 psychiatric units in the northwest suburbs. As the administrator, it was my job to be on call to the staff on the units. And generally, I was called in when there was something going on that was very, very difficult for the staff. Something was going on that was upsetting the staff, was making them afraid, was making them deeply concerned. And when the staff were unsettled, the tenor on a psychiatric unit can change in a moment. So I would go in and I would talk with the staff. We would get together and I would try to get to the bottom of what the problem was. What is happening here? And try to put solutions in place to solve that problem so that by the time I left, and I didn't leave until this happened, the staff was feeling confident and comfortable. I would never leave a staff that wasn't feeling confident and comfortable, because I knew that the comfort of the staff was the key to peace on that unit. And until that comfort was found, the whole unit was not safe. The mentally ill are some of the most vulnerable people in our world, and yet they may not look like they're vulnerable at all. In fact, often they look like you and me. But they go about their lives, and they struggle each and every day just to keep their minds together, just so they can barely function at times, or function at perhaps a job. They work harder on keeping their minds together than they do any other thing. And when there is violence that erupts in our world, or angry words exchanged, or painful divisions that are occurring in the world around them, their minds can break apart. And when that happens, if they have something like a weapon that can cause mass destruction, then we will see an incident like we saw in Las Vegas. Our job as children of God are to protect the vulnerable. We are to protect the very old, the very young, the persons that are handicapped in mind or body or spirit. We are here to protect the poor. And when we protect the most vulnerable in our midst, we protect ourselves too. Why? Because we all share in the pain that is happening in our world. We are all bound together into a single web of humanity. What affects one person affects the world. Our pain is not just our own. Their pain is not just their own. We are bonded together in that web of life that God has created. So when we care for another, especially our most vulnerable, we care for ourselves as well. An incident like the massacre on Monday brings us to a place that is holy ground. It is a place where we recognize evil in our world, when we encounter great suffering, when we encounter death. It is a place where we share together with millions of other people the tragedy that comes to us as human beings from time to time. I want to stand in that place of holy ground with you today. I want to seek peace and pursue it with you. I want to depart from evil and do good with you. And I want to find the humility that comes when our feet are planted in the ruins and our eyes are looking up at the Creator of heaven and earth. When we stand together in a place like that, we can leave together bold and unafraid. And we can listen to words that were spoken in our nation 150 years ago to a people that were divided by hate and war. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up our nation's wounds, to care for the one who has borne the battle, and his widow and his orphan, to find and cherish a peace among ourselves and with all other nations. The love of Christ urges us on. Let us walk together from this place and extend our hand to friend or enemy, to neighbor. Let us seek peace and pursue us. And let us know the face of Christ in the eyes of our most vulnerable. Amen.